The morning bells rang across Kepler 7 station, and Marcus Chen walked down the metal hallway with his gear bag over his shoulder. The Galactic Military Academy was huge, with wide corridors that could fit beings 3 times his size. Strange smells filled the air, some sweet, some sharp, some that made his nose wrinkle. Different species meant different foods, different air needs, different everything. Marcus had been at the academy for 2 months now. He still felt small compared to most of his classmates. The human section of the station was tiny compared to the others. There were only 12 humans in his year, while some species had hundreds of students. He pushed through the doors, into Training Room 7. The ceiling was high enough for the flying species to practice, and the floor was reinforced for the heavy ones. Marcus found his usual spot near the back wall and set down his bag carefully. "Chun," a voice called. Marcus turned to see Pip scuttling over on 6 legs. The Nexary was only 3 feet tall, but her mind worked faster than any computer Marcus had ever seen. Her big compound eyes glittered as she spoke. "Did you finish the orbital mechanics homework?" she asked in her clicking voice. "I calculated 17 different approaches, but I want to check my work against yours." "Yeah, I got it done," Marcus said, pulling out his datapad. "Though I only found 3 good approaches." "Your brain works different than mine." Pip's antennae twitched in what Marcus had learned was amusement. "Humans think in straight lines sometimes. Very practical, but you miss the mathematical beauty." A heavy thud made the floor shake. Korthik had arrived. The Govani stood 8 feet tall and was made of what looked like living rock. His people came from a high-gravity world where everything tried to kill you. Korthik was actually gentle for his species, but gentle for a Govani still meant he could punch through a steel wall. "Little ones," Korthik rumbled, his voice like rocks grinding together. "You are early today." "Better early than late," Marcus said. "Instructor Zektar doesn't like when people are late." Korthik's rocky features shifted into what might have been a smile. "True. Yesterday, he made the late ones run extra drills. Even I was tired after." The temperature in the room dropped a few degrees, which meant Velani had entered. The Etherean moved like flowing water, her energy-based body shifting between solid and pure light. Her people didn't need food or air like the rest of them. They fed on energy directly from stars and power sources. "Good morning, friends," Velani said, her voice sounding like music. "I sense tension in the room today. Something different is planned." Marcus looked around. She was right. The room felt different. Usually their practice equipment was set up and ready. Today, the room was empty except for their group. More students arrived. There were saurians with their sharp claws and quick reflexes. Aquarians in their water suits, moving with grace that came from living in 3 dimensions. Crystallians that looked like walking gemstones, tough and nearly impossible to hurt. Each species had something special, something that made them dangerous or useful in their own way. Marcus checked his gear bag again. Everything was in its place, organized exactly how he liked it. Other students often laughed at how much stuff he carried. Humans were known for bringing too much equipment, they said. Most species traveled light, trusting their natural abilities. The door slammed open with a bang that made everyone jump. Instructor Zektar walked in, his scaled green skin gleaming under the lights. The saurian was old by their standards, with scars across his snout that told stories of real battles. His yellow eyes swept across the room, counting students. 67 present, he said in his hissing voice. Good. Some of you will not be here tomorrow. A nervous ripple went through the group. Zektar was known for his tough training, but he rarely threatened to kick students out. Today we test something different, the instructor continued. Not your strength, not your speed, not your natural gifts that you were born with. Today we test your mind. He pressed a button on his wrist device. The walls of the room changed, becoming transparent. Beyond the walls, they could see another room filled with random objects. Broken furniture, pieces of metal, cleaning supplies, old electronics, and piles of things Marcus couldn't identify. Survival, Zektar said. When you are far from home, when your equipment fails, when everything goes wrong, what then? Do you give up? Do you cry for help? Or do you find a way? Villani's energy form flickered brighter. What kind of test, Instructor? Zektar's mouth opened in what Marcus had learned was a saurian grin. It showed a lot of very sharp teeth. Simple. You will enter that room. You will have 10 minutes to create a weapon using only what you find there. First, to make something that works gets extra shore leave this weekend. The students looked at each other. Shore leave meant time off the station. Time to visit planets and see new things. It was the best reward Zektar ever offered. But Instructor, said one of the Crystallians, some of us do not need weapons. My people have natural armor and strength. And what happens when you face an enemy stronger than you? Zektar asked. What happens when your natural gifts are not enough? You learn to adapt or you die. Marcus felt his heart speed up a little. This was the kind of challenge he had been thinking about since he arrived. While other students practiced with their claws or energy powers or rock-hard skin, Marcus had been preparing for exactly this kind of situation. He looked at his gear bag again. Inside was everything he needed for daily life at the academy. Clothes, tools, supplies, personal items. Things any student might carry. But Marcus had chosen each item very carefully. Questions? Zektar asked. The room was quiet. Marcus could see other students sizing up the challenge. They were already thinking about what they would look for in that room of junk. No questions. Good. Zektar's tail swished behind him. Then we begin in 60 seconds. Line up at the door. Marcus stood up and picked up his bag. Around him, other students were stretching, getting ready to run and search and build. Some were flexing claws. Others were charging up energy. The big ones were cracking knuckles that sounded like breaking stone. Marcus just checked his bag one more time. Everything was still there, still organized, still ready. 30 seconds, Zektar announced. The room filled with nervous energy. This was it. Time to prove what they were made of. The door to the test room slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, piles of random objects covered every surface. Marcus could see broken chairs, twisted metal pipes, old computer parts, cleaning bottles, fabric scraps, and hundreds of other things. The air smelled like oil and dust. Begin! Zektar shouted. 60-7 students rushed through the door at once. The noise was incredible. Feet pounding, voices shouting, objects clattering as people grabbed and threw things around. Marcus walked in calmly behind the rush, his gear bag still over his shoulder. Korthik immediately went to a pile of metal bars. His rocky hands grabbed a thick steel pipe and started bending it into shape. Govani was strong, and Korthik was stronger than most. He could probably turn any piece of metal into a club or spear. Across the room, Villani was looking through a box of old electronics. Her energy fingers could make electricity flow through almost anything. If she found the right parts, she could probably build something that would shock or burn. Pip had found a corner with small mechanical items. Her 6 arms moved like lightning, sorting screws and gears and tiny metal pieces. Marcus could almost see her brain working, calculating weights and forces and angles. Whatever she built would be precise and deadly. The Saurian students were using their natural speed. They ran from pile to pile, their claws clicking on the metal floor. One of them found a broken mop handle and started sharpening the end with his claws. Another was wrapping wire around a chunk of metal to make a handle. 8 minutes remaining. Zektar called from outside the room. the noise got louder. Students were getting desperate. A Crystallian was trying to break a chair leg to the right length, but his people were not good at precise work. An Aquarian in her water suit was looking for anything that could work underwater. In case the test moved to the pool area, Marcus found an empty spot near the back wall. He set down his gear bag and opened it slowly. While everyone else dug through piles of junk, Marcus looked at what he had brought with him. His first item was obvious, a combat knife that all cadets were issued. But as Marcus laid it out on the floor, he was already reaching for the second item. A simple pen, the kind used for taking notes in class. Except Marcus had modified this one. The tip was harder and sharper than it looked. Third item, his belt. It looked normal, but the buckle was reinforced metal that could fit over his knuckles. Fourth item, his bootlaces, which were stronger than regular cord and exactly the right length for certain purposes. 7 minutes? Zektar announced around Marcus. The chaos continued. 2 students were fighting over the same piece of metal. Others were trying to tie things together with scraps of fabric. Someone in the corner was trying to make a sling out of a torn shirt. Marcus kept laying out items from his bag. His water bottle, hard plastic, good weight, could be thrown or used to hit. His datapad, sharp corners, and the charging cable could be useful. His jacket zipper, metal, and if he used it right, it could cut. Pip scuttled past, her arms full of small parts. She stopped when she saw Marcus's neat row of objects. "What are you doing, Chun?" she asked, her compound eyes focusing on his items. "This is not junk from the room. This is your personal gear." "I know," Marcus said calmly. He pulled out a small sewing kit that his mother had given him before he left Earth. Inside were needles, thread, small scissors, and safety pins. All innocent items. All potentially dangerous in the right hands. "But the challenge is to improvise a weapon from what we find here," Pip said, her antennae twitching in confusion. Marcus looked up at her. "The instructor said to improvise a weapon. He didn't say we couldn't use what we brought with us." Pip's eyes went wide. She had not thought of that. Around them, other students were still digging through piles of junk, following the same assumption Pip had made. 6 minutes remaining. Marcus continued his inventory. Coins from his pocket. Earth currency was made of harder metal than most people realized. His student ID card, plastic, but the edge could be sharpened. Even his toothbrush handle could be modified into something useful. Balani floated past, carrying an old battery and some copper wire. She noticed Marcus's organized display and stopped. "Human Chun," she said in her musical voice. "Why are you not searching? The room has many materials." "I'm making an inventory," Marcus said. He was now up to 15 items, all laid out in neat rows. "Inventory of what?" "That is just your daily equipment." Marcus picked up his thermal blanket. Thin, light, nearly invisible, but strong enough to bind or choke. "Yeah, my daily equipment." Something in his tone made Villani's energy form flicker. She looked more carefully at the items Marcus had arranged. Her people were very old and very smart. They had seen many wars and many weapons. 5 minutes. The shouting in the room was getting louder. Some students had managed to create simple weapons. Korthik had bent his metal pipe into a decent club. A Saurian had sharpened his stick into a spear. Others were still struggling to make anything that worked. Marcus kept adding to his collection. His shoelace aglaze. The plastic tips were harder than they looked. The underwire from an old uniform shirt he was going to throw away. Dental floss. Thin, strong, nearly invisible. His class ring from the academy, metal, with raised edges that could damage skin. 4 minutes. Now Marcus was up to 25 items. Then 30. His movements were calm and steady, like he had practiced this exact situation many times before. Korthik finished his club and looked. around to see how others were doing. His rock-like features showed surprise when he saw Marcus's display. "Little human," he rumbled, walking over. "What is this?" "Tools," Marcus said simply. He was now arranging 35 different items, each one placed with careful thought. More students were noticing. The room was still chaotic, but some of the nearest cadets had stopped their frantic searching to stare at Marcus's collection. 3 minutes remaining. Marcus reached the bottom of his gear bag. 40 items laid out in perfect rows. Each one looked innocent and normal, the kind of things any student might carry. But as Vellani studied them with her ancient wisdom, she began to see what Marcus saw. 2 minutes. Marcus stood up and brushed off his knees. He looked at his 40 items, then reached into his jacket pockets. More small objects appeared. Buttons, a small flashlight, paper clips, rubber bands. 1 minute remaining. 45 items, 46. 40-7. Marcus stepped back and looked at his collection. While every other student in the room had found one thing they could turn into a weapon, Marcus had been carrying 47 weapons with him all along. The room was getting quiet as more students noticed. Even Zektar was watching from the doorway, his yellow eyes wide with interest. "Time!" The instructor called. Everyone stopped. The room fell silent except for heavy breathing. 66 students stood next to their improvised weapons, clubs, spears, slings, and electrical devices built from scraps. One student stood next to 47 perfectly organized items that had been weapons all along. The silence in the room was complete. 66 students stood frozen, staring at Marcus and his neat rows of everyday objects. Instructor Zektar's yellow eyes moved from student to student, examining their improvised weapons, before stopping on Marcus's display. "Explain," Zektar said, his voice cutting through the quiet. Marcus knelt down next to his first row. "You said to improvise a weapon. I already had 47 to choose from." He picked up the combat knife. "This one's obvious. Standard issue for all cadets." He moved to the modified pen. "This one's less obvious. I hardened the tip and sharpened it. It can puncture most materials and looks completely innocent." Pip scuttled closer, her compound eyes fixed on the pen. "You modified your writing instrument into a stabbing weapon?" "Emergency backup," Marcus said simply. He picked up his belt. "This buckle fits over knuckles perfectly. Turns a punch into something much more effective." Vellani's energy form flickered brighter. "You carry these items every day. We see you with them in class, in the cafeteria, during drills." "That's the point," Marcus said. He held up his bootlaces. "These are the perfect length for restraining someone. Strong enough to support body weight, thin enough to cut off circulation if needed." Korthic's rocky features shifted in what might have been amazement. "Your footwear bindings are weapons?" Marcus nodded and moved to the next item. "Water bottle, blunt force weapon, also good for throwing. The plastic is hard enough to cause damage." He picked up his datapad. "Sharp corners, decent weight. The charging cable can be used for binding or strangling." A Saurian student stepped forward, his claws clicking nervously. "That is normal student equipment. We all have those items." "You have those items," Marcus agreed. "But you don't think about them the same way." He held up his jacket. "I modified the zipper. See how the metal teeth are shaped? Drag this across skin and it cuts like a saw." The room was completely quiet now except for Marcus's voice. Even the instructor was listening intently. Marcus picked up his sewing kit. "Needles, perfect for pressure points or injecting substances. Thread, can be used to bind wounds or bind enemies. Small scissors, concealed cutting tool. Safety pins, multiple uses for pain compliance or mechanical sabotage." "Pain compliance?" asked an Aquarian, her voice muffled by her water suit. Marcus held up a safety pin. Pressure points. Every species has them. Apply the right amount of force in the right place, and anyone will cooperate. He moved to his next row. Coins. Earth currency is made from harder metals than most species use. Good for throwing or putting inside a sock to make a weighted weapon. He picked up his student ID card. Plastic edge can be sharpened. Also useful for picking locks or jamming mechanisms. Zektar stepped into the room. Continue. Marcus picked up what looked like a normal toothbrush. Handle can be sharpened into a spike. Bristles can be used to deliver poison or irritating substances. He held up a thermal blanket. Light, nearly invisible, but strong enough for binding or choking. Also reflects heat signatures if you need to hide. The students were looking at each other now, uncertain. Everything Marcus was showing them looked completely normal. They had seen him carry these items dozens of times. Shoelace glaze, Marcus continued, pointing to the plastic tips. Harder than they look. Good for pressure point work. He held up a piece of underwire from an old shirt. Flexible metal. Can be shaped into picks, hooks, or cutting edges. Pip's antennae were twitching rapidly. You have turned ordinary maintenance items into weapon systems. Dental floss, Marcus said, holding up a small container. Thin, strong, nearly invisible. Perfect for tripwires or cutting soft materials. Most people never think to look for it. He picked up his class ring. Metal with raised edges. Tons of punch into something that tears flesh. Then his small flashlight. Blinding tool, also good for hitting pressure points. The battery can be used to create electrical burns. You modified your academic ring into a combat weapon? Vellani's voice had a note of something that might have been fear. I chose this ring specifically, Marcus said. The design works for multiple purposes. He moved to his final rows. Paper clips can be straightened into lockpicks or pressure point tools. Rubber bands, good for makeshift slings or binding small objects together. Buttons, if they're made from the right materials, they're basically throwing stars. Korthik was shaking his massive head. How many of these did you say you had? Marcus stood up and counted quickly. 47. Though that's just what I brought today. The number changes depending on the situation. Changes? Zektar's tail was swishing now, a sign he was very interested. Different environments need different tools, Marcus explained. Cold weather means more layers, more materials to work with. Formal events mean different accessories. I adjust my loadout based on the expected threats. Expected threats? And Crystallian student's voice cracked slightly. What threats do you expect at an academy? Marcus looked at him calmly. Any threats? All threats. You never know what's going to happen, so you prepare for everything you can think of. The silence stretched out again. Students were looking at their own gear now, probably wondering what they had missed. Their pockets held pens and coins and various items, but they had never thought about any of it the way Marcus did. Zektar walked slowly around Marcus's display. He came to this academy carrying enough weapons to outfit a small squad. I came to this academy prepared for problems, Marcus corrected. These aren't weapons unless I need them to be weapons. Most of the time, they're just normal stuff. But we think about them as weapons. Marcus shrugged. I think about them as tools. Tools can be used for many things. Vellani's energy form was pulsing slowly. Your species. They all think this way? Pretty much, Marcus said. Maybe not to this extent, but yeah. Humans don't like being caught unprepared. Pip scuttled around the display, studying each item. This level of preparation suggests a species under constant threat. What predators did humans evolve alongside? Marcus thought about that. All of them. Humans weren't the biggest or strongest or fastest. We survived by being smart and being ready for anything, even things that hadn't happened yet. Zektar observed, especially things that hadn't happened yet. The instructor picked up Marcus's modified pen and examined it carefully. How long did it take you to prepare all of these items? Some of them came modified from Earth. Others I worked on during the trip here. A few I finished after arriving at the academy. Marcus gestured to his neat rows. It's an ongoing project. Project? Making sure I can handle any situation that comes up, Marcus said. The goal is to never be helpless. Zektar set down the pen and looked around the room. The other students were still staring, some at Marcus, some at their own possessions, some at the piles of junk they had been digging through. Cadet Chan, the instructor said formally, you have completed this exercise in a way I did not expect. Marcus nodded. Did I win? For the first time since Marcus had known him, Zektar looked uncertain. That, he said slowly, remains to be determined. The instructor's wrist device beeped. Everyone out of the test room. We will continue this discussion in the classroom. As the students filed out, Marcus carefully packed his items back into his gear bag. Everything had its place. Everything was organized exactly as he liked it. Behind him, he could hear other students whispering to each other in a dozen different languages. But the words were all the same. How had they missed this? How had the quiet human been carrying an arsenal this whole time? Marcus shouldered his bag and followed the group out. The real test, he suspected, was just beginning. Back in the main classroom, the students sat in their usual spots, but the atmosphere was completely different. Everyone kept glancing at Marcus, who sat calmly in his back corner with his gear bag at his feet. Conversations were happening in whispers across the room. Instructor Zektar stood at the front, his yellow eyes studying each student. He seemed to be thinking about something important. Before we discuss what just happened, Zektar began, I want each species to tell me how your people approach danger. He pointed to Korthik. Govani first. The massive rock being stood up slowly. Instructor, my people meet threats head-on. We are strong. We are tough. When something attacks us, we hit it harder than it hits us. This has worked for thousands of years. And if you cannot hit harder? Korthik's features shifted uncomfortably. Then, we hit first. Or we group together with other Govani. Zektar nodded. Velani, your people? The energy being flickered as she spoke. Etherians avoid most conflicts. We can become pure energy and escape almost any physical threat. When we must fight, we use our natural abilities to control electricity and heat. What if your enemy is immune to energy attacks? Velani was quiet for a moment. That has never happened. Our abilities work on all known species. Pip? The small Nexari clicked excitedly. Nexari analyze threats mathematically. We calculate the best response based on probability and available resources. We build tools or find allies based on the numbers. And if your calculations are wrong? Pip's antennae drooped slightly. We recalculate. But our math is rarely wrong. Zektar continued around the room. Each species had their answer. Saurians relied on speed and natural weapons. Crystallians used their nearly unbreakable bodies. Aquarians depended on their three-dimensional movement skills. Everyone had something they were naturally good at. Finally, Zektar looked at Marcus. Human? Marcus stood up slowly. Humans assume everything will go wrong. The room was quiet. Explain, Zektar said. Marcus thought for a moment. My species comes from a planet that tried to kill us every day. Ice ages, plagues, predators, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, floods. We survived because we never trusted that today would be like yesterday. Other species face similar challenges, Velani pointed out. Maybe, Marcus said. But humans faced all of them at once. We didn't evolve on a world that was good at one thing. Earth was good at change. Always changing. So we had to be good at change too. Zektar's tail swished. Continue. Every human carries what we call paranoid thinking, Marcus explained. We look at any situation and ask, what could go wrong? What if my primary plan fails? What if my backup plan fails? What if something I never thought of happens? Korthik rumbled. That sounds exhausting. Marcus shrugged. It keeps us alive. See, other species evolved to be really good at specific things. Humans evolved to be really good at not dying when everything goes wrong. But you are not stronger than us, a Crystallian student said. Or faster, or more durable. No, Marcus agreed. But we're more prepared. When your natural advantages don't work, what then? When Korthik meets something stronger, when Vellani faces something that absorbs energy, when Pip's calculations don't account for unknown variables, what then? The students looked at each other uncertainly. Marcus gestured to his bag. Humans don't trust having only one solution. We carry backup solutions for our backup solutions. The items in your bag, Pip said slowly. You have thought about how to use each one as a weapon. Not just as weapons, Marcus corrected. As tools. For fighting, yes, but also for escaping, for first aid, for communication, for making fire, for finding food, for building shelter. Each item serves multiple purposes because I never know which purpose I'll need. Zektar stepped forward. How many humans think this way? All of us, to some degree. My level might be extreme, but every human has some version of this mindset. We call it being prepared, or having a backup plan, or just thinking ahead. Your species plans for disasters that have not happened. Zektar observed. Our species plans for disasters that might happen. Because on Earth, if you wait for the disaster to start before you prepare, you die. Vellani's energy form pulsed thoughtfully. This explains much about human behavior. Why you always ask what-if questions in tactical class. Why you suggest redundant systems for everything. Marcus nodded. We've learned that systems fail. Plans go wrong. The thing you were sure would work doesn't work. So you always have another way. But this also means, Pip said, her mind working fast, that humans are constantly thinking about threats. You live in a state of permanent defensive preparation. I guess, Marcus said. Though we don't think of it as paranoid or defensive. We think of it as normal. Zektar was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Cadet-chan, what I showed you today was not really about making weapons. Marcus raised an eyebrow. No. This exercise was designed to reveal how different species think under pressure. How they approach problems. How they use their natural advantages. The instructor walked to the transparent wall that showed the test room. Every species in this academy relies primarily on their evolved strengths. When faced with a challenge, they default to what evolution gave them. Except humans, Vellani said quietly. Except humans, Zektar agreed. Humans assume their natural advantages won't be enough. So they prepare artificial advantages. They turn ordinary objects into tools. They plan for scenarios they have never experienced. Marcus was starting to understand. This wasn't about weapons at all. This was about adaptability, Zektar confirmed. About what happens when your normal methods fail. About thinking beyond your natural limitations. Korthik's rocky features were thoughtful. You are saying humans are naturally prepared for unnatural situations. I am saying humans evolved to survive change itself, Zektar replied. Other species evolved to survive specific environments. Humans evolved to survive when their environment stops being predictable. The room fell silent again. Students were processing this idea. There's one more test, Zektar announced. Marcus felt his heart rate increase slightly. Another test? Yes, but this time, the scenario is different. Zektar's grin showed all his sharp teeth. This time, you have nothing. No bag, no equipment, no prepared items. You are stripped of all your tools and placed in an unknown situation. Then what? Marcus looked around the room. Every student was watching him now, curious to see if human preparedness went beyond just carrying the right equipment. When do we start? Marcus asked. Zektar's laugh was like rocks grinding together. We already have. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean we already started? Zektar gestured around the empty classroom. Look around, Cadet-chan. You have no bag, no prepared equipment. This room has been cleared of everything except basic furniture. You are wearing only a standard academy uniform. Now, show us what humans do when they have nothing. The other students leaned forward in their seats. Marcus looked around the room slowly. Standard chairs, basic tables, overhead lights, a teaching board, air vents, and not much else. I don't understand the challenge, Marcus said carefully. The challenge is simple, Zektar replied. Demonstrate that human preparedness extends beyond carrying equipment. Show us that your species' adaptability works even when you have no tools. Marcus stood still for a moment, thinking. Then he smiled slightly. Instructor, what level of force is authorized for this demonstration? Non-lethal only, but you may demonstrate on a volunteer if someone agrees. Korthik stood up immediately. I will volunteer. I am curious to see what the small human can do without his prepared items. Korthik, you're 8 feet tall and made of rock, Marcus pointed out. Which is why this will be interesting. The massive Gavani rumbled. Show us, little human. Marcus nodded and walked to the center of the room. The thing about humans is that we don't just prepare equipment. We prepare ourselves. He gestured to his own body. Every human learns basic anatomy from childhood. We know where the weak points are on our own species and most others. Pressure points, joint locks, blood flow restriction. Marcus demonstrated on himself, pressing a point on his own arm that made his hand go numb. Humans study how bodies work because bodies are the one tool we always have. He moved to one of the chairs. We also learned to see weapons everywhere. He showed how the chair could be used for leverage, how its legs could be used for striking, how it could be thrown or used as shield. Any furniture becomes a weapon, Marcus explained, demonstrating different grips and angles. Tables can be flipped for cover. Legs can be broken off for clubs. Even the cushions can be used for smothering or padding improvised armor. Pip's compound eyes were focused intently. You are analyzing the environment for combat applications. I'm analyzing the environment for survival applications, Marcus corrected. Combat is just one aspect. He pointed to the air vents. Escape routes. The grating can be removed with the right pressure applied to the corners. The ducts lead to other parts of the station. Then to the lighting. The fixtures can be unscrewed and used as weights or thrown objects. The electrical connections can be accessed for power or for causing shorts to create darkness. Marcus walked to the teaching board. The surface is smooth enough to reflect light for signaling. The frame is metal that can be bent into tools. The markers contain chemicals that can be weaponized if needed. Your jacket, Alani observed. You are not wearing the same jacket from before. Marcus looked down at his standard academy jacket. Different jacket, same principles. He showed how the sleeves could be used for binding, how the zipper could be used for cutting, how the collar could be used for choking. Even my boots, Marcus said, lifting one foot. The sole has a specific tread pattern that works as a gripping surface or a file. The laces can be removed for binding. The toe is reinforced for kicking. The heel can be used for hammering. Korthik stepped forward. I am ready for your demonstration, human. Marcus looked at the massive Gurvani. Are you sure? I don't want to actually hurt you. I am made of living stone, Marcus-chan. Do your worst. Marcus nodded and moved around Korthik, studying him. Gurvani anatomy is different from human, but the same principles apply. You have joints, even if they're harder to manipulate. You have a nervous system, even if it's more distributed than ours. Without warning, Marcus moved. He didn't try to punch or kick Korthik directly. Instead, he used the big alien's own weight against him. A quick push at the right angle, a foot placed where Korthik would step. And suddenly, the 8-foot giant was off balance. Marcus followed up by grabbing Korthik's arm and applying pressure to a joint that worked differently than human joints, but still had mechanical limits. Korthik found himself being guided to the ground by forces he couldn't easily counter. Leverage, Marcus explained as he helped Korthik back up. Every body obeys the same physical laws. Find the right points to apply force, and size doesn't matter as much. The room was completely silent. Korthik rubbed his arm where Marcus had pressured the joint. You did not hurt me, Korthik said slowly. But I could not stop you from moving me where you wanted. That's the point, Marcus replied. Humans learned early that we couldn't win fights by being stronger. So we learned to win fights by being smarter. Zektar stepped forward. Continue the demonstration. Marcus picked up a simple pen from the instructor's desk. I don't have my modified pen, but any pen can work. The tip can be used for pressure points. The body can be gripped for leverage. If broken, the pieces become cutting tools. He showed how his uniform belt, even without a special buckle, could be used as a weapon or restraint. How his student ID card, even unmodified, had sharp corners and could be used for cutting or scraping. The point, Marcus said, setting down the improvised tools, is that humans don't just carry weapons. We are trained to make weapons from anything. But more than that, he continued, we're trained to think like weapons. Our minds are the real tool. Everything else is just what we use to apply what we know. Pip scuttled forward. This suggests that every human is essentially a walking weapons platform. Marcus thought about that. More like every human is a walking survival platform. We're trained from birth to handle problems, to adapt to new situations, to find solutions when normal methods fail. Even when you have nothing, Velani said. Especially when we have nothing, Marcus confirmed. Because having nothing is when humans are most dangerous. That's when we stop following rules and start improvising. Zektar walked to the center of the room. This concludes today's demonstration. He looked around at all the students. What you have witnessed is why humans are valuable partners in the Galactic Confederation. Not because they are the strongest, or the smartest, or the fastest, but because they are the most prepared for the unexpected. When your ship breaks down in unknown space, you want a human on your crew. When your equipment fails during a mission, you want a human to help you improvise solutions. When everything goes wrong and your natural abilities aren't enough, you want a human to show you alternatives you never considered. The instructor's yellow eyes fixed on Marcus. Humans don't just think outside the box, as you say. They assume the box might explode and prepare accordingly. Marcus smiled. We prefer to be ready for problems that never happen and sorry about problems we didn't see coming. Korthik rumbled thoughtfully. This explains much about human behavior that we found strange. Like what? Marcus asked. Why you always pack extra food for trips that have scheduled meals? Why you carry medical supplies to safe locations? Why you ask about emergency procedures, even in peaceful situations? Melania's energy form pulsed with understanding. Why human engineers design so many backup systems? Why human diplomats always have alternative proposals ready? Pip's antennae twitched rapidly. Why humans seem paranoid to other species, but survive situations that kill everyone else. Zektar nodded approvingly. Exactly. What other species call paranoia, humans call preparedness. And that preparedness has saved countless lives throughout the galaxy. The instructor looked at Marcus one more time. Cadet Chen, you have earned your shore leave. But more importantly, you have taught your classmates something valuable about adaptation and survival. As the class ended and students filed out, several of them stopped to talk to Marcus. They wanted to know more about human preparation techniques. They asked if he could teach them some of the skills he had demonstrated. Marcus agreed, but with a warning. First lesson. Everything you're wearing right now can save your life. Let me show you how to see what you already have. As the classroom emptied, Marcus picked up his gear bag and checked its contents. Everything was still there, still organized, still ready for whatever came next, because that was what humans did. They prepared for tomorrow's problems today, and they never assumed today's solutions would be enough for tomorrow's challenges. Outside the windows of Kepler 7 station, the stars waited with whatever mysteries they held. Marcus looked forward to meeting them all.